Jason Statham is known as one of the toughest guys in Hollywood. On screen, he takes down villains with his fists, knives, or even his bare hands. But off-screen, he's just as fearless. Statham doesn't play games when it comes to his career, and he's never been afraid to speak his mind. That honesty has led to a few clashes with some of the biggest names in the business. From playful rivalries to heated creative battles, Statham has had his fair share of drama with fellow stars. Join us as we take a look at the 6 actors Jason Statham never got along with. Paul Bettany. Jason Statham has always been known as the tough guy of Hollywood. He built his career on raw action, stunts, and fight scenes that he often performed himself. Movies like The Transporter, Crank, and The Expendables made him a household name because audiences could see the authenticity in his roles. He didn't rely on wires, green screens, or computer tricks. When you saw Statham throwing punches or hanging off the side of a speeding car, that was really him doing it. His style has always been about grit and realism. That is why, in 2015, when Statham was asked about joining a superhero movie, he gave an answer that lit up headlines. He said something along the lines of, "Anyone can be in those movies. My grandma could wear a cape, stand in front of a green screen, and a stunt double would do the work." It was classic Statham. Direct, blunt, and a little cheeky. But his comments didn't sit well with everyone, especially those already part of the Marvel world. One actor who didn't let Statham's words slide was Paul Bettany. At that time, Bettany was stepping into the spotlight as Vision in Avengers: Age of Ultron. He had been in the Marvel Universe before, voicing Jarvis, Iron Man's AI system, but playing Vision gave him a full physical role on screen. When Bettany went on Conan O'Brien's talk show, he was asked about Statham's comments. Instead of ignoring it, Bettany fired back with a little humor of his own. He joked that maybe Statham should consider hiring an acting double, just like Marvel actors sometimes rely on stunt doubles. The audience laughed, and the playful jab quickly spread online. This moment turned into one of those rare Hollywood mini-feuds that fans love to watch. It wasn't a screaming match or a career-ending insult, but it was enough to get people talking. On one side, you had Statham, the tough action star who prided himself on doing the dangerous work himself. On the other, Bettany, a respected actor who had spent years in drama before becoming part of the Marvel franchise. The clash between them highlighted a bigger debate: the difference between old-school action stars and modern superhero actors. Statham's frustration was clear. He came from a background where action was physical and dangerous. Before acting, he trained as a competitive diver and martial artist. His body was his tool, and he wanted that to show on screen. Marvel movies, however, relied heavily on special effects. Bettany and other Marvel actors often performed in motion capture suits, with much of the action added later in editing. To Statham, this felt less authentic. Fans of Marvel, though, argued that acting isn't just about doing stunts. It's about bringing a character to life, even if the action is created with technology. Bettany's response was clever because he didn't attack Statham's skills. He simply turned the criticism back at him in a way that was funny, not cruel. It showed the difference in personalities. Statham was serious and straightforward. Bettany was witty and quick on his feet. Neither of them seemed to carry deep personal hatred, but the exchange gave the media a story. It painted Statham as the tough traditionalist and Bettany as the smart defender of modern filmmaking. Fans also took sides. Some agreed with Statham, saying superhero movies had become too dependent on CGI and lacked the raw edge of action films from the past. Others defended Bettany, pointing out that Marvel films created a different kind of art that didn't need to be judged against old-school action. The back and forth added to the larger cultural conversation about what audiences value in action films today. Interestingly, the feud never grew beyond those playful jabs. Statham continued to star in big franchises like Fast and Furious and The Meg, sticking to his trademark style. Bettany kept his place in the Marvel Universe and earned praise for bringing heart and complexity to Vision. The two never worked together, but they also never escalated their comments into something serious. In later interviews, Bettany even praised Statham's talent, calling him fantastic at what he does. That showed there wasn't real bad blood, just two actors with different perspectives. Vin Diesel. When Jason Statham joined the Fast and Furious series as Deckard Shaw, fans instantly loved it. He brought a darker, sharper energy that stood out against the rest of the crew, but behind the scenes, things weren't always smooth. Vin Diesel, who had been the face of the franchise for years, was known to be very protective of his role. Reports from the set of Fast and Furious 7 revealed something unusual. Both Diesel and Statham had clauses in their contracts about how their fight scenes should play out. It wasn't just about acting, it was about image. Diesel wanted the battles to look perfectly balanced, even going as far as keeping track of how many punches each character gave and received. Statham, on the other hand, also made sure his character never looked weak on screen. What could have been a simple fight, choreographed for entertainment, turned into a careful game of ego and control. The idea of a punch count sounds funny at first, but in Hollywood, appearances matter. Action stars build their careers on toughness. If one character gets beaten up too badly, it can hurt how audiences see them. Diesel had been the leading man of the franchise for years. He wanted to make sure nobody stole that spotlight, especially when someone like Statham came in with his own strong fan base and reputation for gritty action. Meanwhile, Statham had worked hard to create his own image outside the superhero and CGI world. He wasn't about to let his character get tossed around on screen like a sidekick. This is why those fight scenes had to be carefully balanced, sometimes to the point of being unrealistic. People on set described the atmosphere as tense. Choreographers and stunt teams had to design sequences where neither man truly lost. One insider claimed that there were conversations about keeping fights even. If Diesel got punched, he had to land one back. If Statham was thrown, he had to throw Diesel in return. The result was action that looked intense on camera, but was the product of careful negotiation behind the curtain. Fans who watched those scenes probably didn't realize how much behind-the-scenes math went into making sure both men looked equally powerful. Statham himself didn't talk much about it publicly. He's not the type to go around stirring drama in interviews, but he has admitted in other talks that he doesn't like looking weak on screen, and that he takes pride in his characters always standing their ground. Diesel, meanwhile, has long been known for his need to control the direction of the Fast and Furious films. He even calls himself the father of the franchise. That kind of mindset can sometimes clash with strong personalities like Statham, who came in already established as a leading man in his own right. The interesting part is that all of this wasn't really about hatred. It wasn't that Statham and Diesel disliked each other personally. It was more about power and image. Both men wanted to protect their on-screen personas, and neither wanted to come across as the weaker fighter. That's why the rivalry didn't explode into a public feud like the one between Diesel and Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. Instead, it stayed mostly in the background, a professional tension that shaped the way their scenes looked on screen. Looking back, the whole punch count story has become one of those Hollywood legends that shows how fragile egos can be, even among the toughest-looking stars. On screen, Statham and Diesel gave fans explosive action and thrilling battles. Off-screen, their quiet rivalry showed just how much goes into protecting an actor's image. It wasn't about who was stronger in real life, it was about how they wanted to be remembered on film. The Rock. Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson and Vin Diesel's feud is one of the most famous in modern Hollywood. It was loud, messy, and played out in public for years. Johnson once called some of his male co-stars candy asses on Instagram, a not-so-subtle dig at Diesel's behavior on set. That one post exposed a storm brewing behind the cameras of the Fast and Furious films. But while most of the headlines focused on Diesel and Johnson, another star was quietly connected to all the drama: Jason Statham. Unlike the others, Statham didn't throw insults online or give fiery interviews. Instead, he found a way to stay neutral while still ending up at the center of it all. When Statham first appeared in the franchise as Deckard Shaw, he was introduced as a villain in Fast and Furious 6 and 7. His character quickly became one of the most exciting parts of the series. By the time The Fate of the Furious came around, audiences were hooked on his chemistry with Johnson's character, Luke Hobbs. Their scenes together were sharp, funny, and full of tension. Fans loved watching them trade insults as much as punches. It was clear Universal saw something special in their pairing. This led to the creation of Hobbs and Shaw in 2019, a spin-off starring Johnson and Statham. The movie was a huge success, but it also poured fuel on the Diesel-Johnson fire. Diesel reportedly wasn't happy that Johnson branched off with Statham for their own film, because it shifted attention away from the main franchise. What makes this story interesting is how Statham handled the situation. He didn't choose sides or add more drama. In fact, he made it clear in interviews that he had no personal issues with anyone. When asked about the feud, he said, "If there was a problem, I'd know about it." That was his way of shutting down rumors that he and Johnson had any tension. It showed that while others let emotions spill into the public, Statham kept things professional. His focus was on the work, not the politics. Fans noticed that while Diesel and Johnson fought for control of the franchise, Statham quietly benefited. The spin-off gave him more screen time and helped cement him as a major piece of the Fast universe. It also let audiences see a different side of him. In Hobbs and Shaw, he got to mix action with humor in a way that balanced perfectly with Johnson's larger-than-life style. Even though the movie caused trouble behind the scenes, it boosted Statham's career. It's worth noting that Johnson often praised Statham publicly. He called him a bad dude in a good way, and said working with him was easy and fun. That's very different from how Johnson described Diesel. It shows that while Johnson clashed with some co-stars, he respected Statham. Their chemistry on screen wasn't just acting, it reflected a real professional relationship off-camera. Statham, in turn, never said anything negative about Johnson. He seemed to understand that staying quiet was the best way to avoid becoming part of the feud. Even after Hobbs and Shaw, when rumors swirled that Diesel was angry about the spin-off, Statham didn't comment. He kept doing his work, filming The Meg, other action films, and staying busy. That's his style. While some actors thrive on headlines and controversy, Statham thrives on results. He lets his movies speak for him. This is why fans see him as someone who avoids unnecessary drama even when he's in the middle of it. Today, there's no sign of bad blood between Statham and Johnson. If anything, fans want to see them back together in another spin-off. The feud between Diesel and Johnson may have made headlines, but Statham managed to walk through it untouched. Sylvester Stallone. When two powerhouse action stars like Jason Statham and Sylvester Stallone share the same screen, you know sparks are bound to fly. Both men are icons in their own right. Stallone, of course, made his mark decades earlier with Rocky and Rambo, shaping the blueprint for the tough, larger-than-life action hero. Statham, on the other hand, rose to fame in the 2000s with films like The Transporter and Crank, showing the world a more modern, fast-paced kind of action star who relied on real stunts and martial arts. When Stallone decided to create The Expendables, he wanted to bring together the biggest names in action, old and new, to celebrate the genre. It was a dream cast, and Statham fit perfectly. But as the series went on, especially with The Expendables 3, cracks began to show. Reports from the time suggested that Stallone and some of his castmates, including Statham, had heated debates over the creative direction of the film. Stallone, being the writer and one of the producers, had the final word on the script. He was known for rewriting scenes, changing dialogue, and shaping the movie on his terms. This was nothing new. Stallone had always been hands-on with his projects, but when you put so many big personalities in one place, disagreements were inevitable. Statham, who had already built a reputation as a strong action lead, wasn't the type to just nod along. He valued authenticity, and when things didn't feel right to him, he spoke up. That's where the tension came from. Some of the biggest disputes reportedly came from creative control. The cast wanted more freedom to shape their characters, while Stallone wanted the movie to stick to his vision. Statham, in particular, was protective of how his character, Lee Christmas, came across. He didn't want him watered down or turned into comic relief, and he certainly didn't want him overshadowed. This led to debates about fight scenes, dialogue, and even the overall tone of the film. At one point, insiders claimed arguments broke out during script discussions, with Stallone refusing to budge on certain rewrites. What made the situation even more interesting was the level of respect both men had for each other. Statham has often called Stallone a legend, admitting that working with him was a huge honor. In one interview he said, "Sly has done it all. To share the screen with him is something I never take for granted." But at the same time, respect doesn't erase disagreements. Stallone, with his decades of experience, believed he knew what worked in an action movie. Statham, with his more modern approach, wanted something that felt less old-fashioned. The clash was not about personal dislike, but about two creative forces pulling in different directions. Fans noticed that The Expendables 3 didn't have the same punch as the earlier films. Some blamed the PG-13 rating, which was a move Stallone pushed for, while others pointed to the overcrowded cast and uneven story. Whatever the reasons, behind the curtain there had been enough tension to make headlines. The media described it as a battle of egos, but those close to the set insisted it was more about passion for the project. Both Stallone and Statham cared deeply about action cinema, and that passion sometimes spilled into arguments. Despite the tension, their professional relationship didn't end in flames. In fact, when The Expendables 4 was finally announced years later, Statham was not only back, but had an even bigger role. This time, he shared top billing with Stallone, showing that any old disagreements hadn't destroyed their bond. If anything, it seemed Stallone had recognized Statham's star power and gave him more room to shine. That move suggested growth on both sides, Stallone willing to step back a little, and Statham proving himself as a reliable anchor for the franchise. In the end, the so-called feud between Jason Statham and Sylvester Stallone wasn't about hatred. It was about two men with strong ideas trying to make the best possible movie. Jean-Claude Van Damme. Jean-Claude Van Damme is one of those names that instantly brings back memories of the golden age of action films. In the late 80s and 90s, he was known as the Muscles from Brussels, a martial arts powerhouse who dominated the screen with movies like Bloodsport, Kickboxer, and Universal Soldier. He became a symbol of a different era, when action movies were less about big budgets and special effects, and more about pure physical skill and charisma. Years later, Jason Statham would rise as the face of a new generation of action heroes. His films like The Transporter and Crank gave audiences high-speed chases, brutal fight sequences, and stunts that looked almost reckless. Because of that, people often compared Statham to Van Damme, seeing him as the natural heir to that old-school tradition. But Van Damme himself once hinted that modern stars like Statham owed their careers to the trailblazing work he had done, and that sparked a wave of debate among fans and critics. The comments weren't said in a cruel way, but they carried weight. Van Damme made it clear that without actors like him paving the way for martial arts in Hollywood, the new generation wouldn't have had the same opportunities. He saw himself as the foundation, and in many ways, he wasn't wrong. In the 80s, martial arts movies were still seen as niche, and Van Damme helped push them into the mainstream. Statham, by contrast, entered a world where audiences already loved martial arts in action films. He had the advantage of building on what Van Damme and others had done. That's why many framed Van Damme's comments as shade directed at Statham, as if he was saying, "You wouldn't be here if it weren't for me." Statham never fired back, which tells you a lot about his character. He has always kept his focus on the work and avoids public fights. While Van Damme loved to talk about his legacy, Statham seemed more interested in proving himself with each film. But the fans didn't let the comparison go. Debates broke out online about who was tougher, who had the better movies, and who truly represented the spirit of action. Some said Van Damme had the edge because he did it first, and carried films at a time when the genre wasn't respected. Others argued that Statham had raised the bar, taking the martial arts style and mixing it with modern, gritty realism. What made the conversation even more fascinating was that both men eventually ended up working together in The Expendables 2. Van Damme played the villain Jean Villain, while Statham reprised his role as Lee Christmas. Their scenes together became a highlight of the movie. Watching them share the screen felt like two generations of action cinema colliding. Van Damme's performance was over the top and theatrical, while Statham kept it grounded and intense. Critics and fans saw it as a symbolic moment, almost like a passing of the torch. And even though their characters were enemies on screen, off-screen both men showed respect. Stallone once said that Van Damme's villain role was written with his energy in mind, while Statham admitted he admired Van Damme's contribution to the genre. Still, the shadow of that rivalry never completely disappeared. Van Damme's words continued to fuel the idea that there was a divide between the old guard and the new stars. Some fans believed Van Damme was jealous of Statham's continued success at a time when his own career had slowed down. Others thought he was simply stating a fact, that history matters, and that modern stars stand on the shoulders of those who came before them. Either way, it created drama without either man needing to throw insults directly. In truth, there isn't any ongoing bad blood between Jason Statham and Jean-Claude Van Damme. Both have carved out their places in action history, just in different eras. Van Damme may be the symbol of the flashy, high-kick-driven 80s, while Statham represents the gritty, grounded action of the 2000s and beyond. Their careers tell two halves of the same story. Action heroes change with the times, but the respect for toughness, skill, and presence on screen never goes away. Even if Van Damme's comments sparked rivalry talk, fans got what they really wanted. Two legends sharing the same universe, giving audiences a taste of both the past and the present. Jet Li. When The Expendables hit theaters in 2010, it was more than just another action film. It was a gathering of some of the biggest names in the genre, both past and present, from all corners of the world. Among the heavyweights in the cast were Jason Statham, the British star who had built a reputation for hard-hitting, street-level action, and Jet Li, the martial arts legend from China who had already proven himself in Hollywood with movies like Romeo Must Die and Hero. Putting them in the same movie was a dream for action fans. It wasn't just about seeing explosions and gunfights, it was about seeing two different styles of action collide. On one side was Statham, representing the raw, gritty, get-your-hands-dirty type of brawling. On the other side was Jet Li, the master of speed, precision, and martial arts grace. Fans immediately began to compare the two, and soon there were debates about who had the better fight scenes. It felt like an East versus West rivalry, even though both men respected each other. From the very first Expendables movie, Their characters had chemistry. Statham played Lee Christmas, the knife-throwing specialist who relied on brute strength and quick hands. Jet Li played Yin Yang, a smaller but lightning-fast fighter who often joked about being underestimated. Their banter on screen was sharp, with Li's character pointing out his size and Statham's character firing back with witty comebacks. This playful tension spilled into the fight choreography. In one of their memorable moments, the two fought side by side, blending their styles in a way that looked natural but also competitive. Viewers couldn't help but wonder, were they secretly trying to outshine each other? Behind the scenes, choreographers worked carefully to make both men look good. Jet Li's background in wushu and years of martial arts training meant his movements were quick, sharp, and almost balletic. He could do things with his body that seemed superhuman. Statham, on the other hand, had a background in diving, boxing, and martial arts like kickboxing. His style wasn't about looking pretty, it was about looking dangerous and real. When you put those two together in the same scene, the contrast was striking. That's why fans started speculating about a rivalry. They wanted to know who could win in a real fight and who the directors favored when choreographing action scenes. What made the comparison even louder was how different their careers had been. Jet Li was already a global superstar by the time The Expendables came around. In Asia, he was considered royalty in the martial arts film world. In Hollywood, he had fought alongside stars like DMX in Cradle to the Grave and even clashed with Jackie Chan in The Forbidden Kingdom. Statham, by contrast, was still on the rise when he first joined Stallone's cast. He had proven himself in the Transporter series, Crank, and Death Race, but standing next to Jet Li gave him new credibility. Fans noticed this dynamic and started asking whether Statham was trying to prove he could stand shoulder to shoulder with the legends. Interestingly, while the fans built up this East versus West rivalry, the actors themselves never fed into it. Statham often spoke with admiration about working with Li. He praised his skill and speed, calling him unbelievably quick and saying it was a privilege to fight alongside him on screen. Jet Li, known for his humble personality, never threw shade at Statham either. Instead, he often highlighted how The Expendables gave him a chance to collaborate with international talent and blend different action traditions. Their mutual respect was clear, but that didn't stop audiences from enjoying the imagined rivalry. As the franchise went on, the comparisons continued. Some fans argued that Statham got more screen time and bigger action set pieces, while Li's role was scaled back. That fueled speculation that Stallone and the producers wanted to push Statham as the new face of action, while Jet Li represented the old guard. Others said it was just logistics. Li had health issues at the time and couldn't commit to the same intense filming schedule as before. Still, every time the two shared the screen, the energy was electric, and fans couldn't help but measure one against the other. What makes this so fascinating is how it shows the way audiences project rivalries onto stars, even when those stars are perfectly friendly. Jet Li and Jason Statham never had a real feud. There were no angry interviews, no public jabs, no stories of fights behind the scenes. But because of who they were, two masters of their craft with such different styles, fans turned their collaboration into a competition. Which of these feuds and bittersweet rivalries surprised you the most, and why? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more incredible stories from Hollywood's fascinating history. See you next time!